You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to BuckeyeGrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
Good Wednesday to everybody, and welcome back to a special edition of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, which is brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. I am your host, Kyle Lamb, and I did say good Wednesday, and I know that is rare for me to say because, as you know, our publishing schedule here on the Unscripted Ohio Podcast is every Monday and Friday, typically. And the reason we are coming to you this Wednesday is because, yes, that guy, he who shall not be named, Voldemort of Ohio State football, the guy that you don't want to say his name out loud for fear that he will come back to life and he will haunt Ohio State. He is back in the news, he being Bret McMurphy of former Facebook fame, and now he is a writer, of course, for Stadium. Well, Stadium on Tuesday published a new, I'm going to say bombshell, but I tell you what, it is not a bombshell. It is not even a firecracker. Alleging that Zach Smith made a racially charged and sensitive comment toward freshman wide receiver Trayvon Grimes back in 2017. You may remember Grimes has since transferred to the University of Florida, where he is playing for the Gators after receiving a waiver to be immediately eligible. But this story by Bret McMurphy goes on to allege that Smith made this comment and caused an altercation in practice in September of 2017, and that this incident or altercation was witnessed by Ohio State coaches and players and staff members, and that Ohio State subsequently went to Florida after Trayvon wanted to transfer and basically begged and pleaded for the family to keep it quiet, and in return, they would allow him to transfer without penalty and without blocking the transfer. Because, as you know, the university, in any university for that matter, and the NCAA has to give permission until this year. The rules actually since changed, but basically they would have to allow any potential transfer to, they would have to sign off for them to be able to transfer. And so the deal here, as being proposed and portrayed by Bret McMurphy, is that Ohio State basically said, if you keep this quiet, keep this hush-hush, we will allow you to transfer to the University of Florida. Now, so here's the gist of this. This whole story is absolutely maddening. Those of you that were following along when the saga began in late July and throughout August, you know my stance on the reporting. I have such an issue. I am not a journalist, and I freely admit that. I'm not a journalist by trade. My primary role here is a podcast host. I have done some beat writing in the past. I take journalism very seriously. I abide by the ethics and standards of what I believe journalists should follow. And so you know, I have said it so many times throughout this whole ordeal, I have no respect for any of the trash, and that is what it is that has been printed by Bret McMurphy. And here's the scary thing. This latest piece of garbage that was printed by Stadium, and shame on Stadium for whatever editor or editors signed off on this. This piece makes you remember the sex toy story back in August, the one that was ran by Stadium where, Bret basically had all this proof that sex toys were delivered to the Woody Hayes athletic facility, for Zach Smith, and Zach supposedly ordered this because of his sex addiction. Well, for as bad as that was, this latest piece written by Bret McMurphy makes that look like award-winning journalism. I mean, it is really incredible. That sex toy story should win a Pulitzer Prize compared to how bad this is. Because this was written, basically, I kid you not. So, Bret thoroughly researches a whole bunch of facts in this story. You go through a timeline, and Leah Grimes, now Leah and the father, which is basically the primary witness, if you want to call it that, the primary source of this story, LeBron Grimes, these two have been divorced for a long time, okay? And he is the biological father of Trayvon Grimes, and Trayvon grew up basically with Leah. And according to Leah in this story, they have not had contact in over 2 years. Now, whether or not that is true, we don't know, but that is actually a side ancillary point that really doesn't matter, in my opinion. And I'll tell you why here in a second. But this whole story basically centers around LeBron Grimes. And the reason this is so shameful is because there are so many details about Leah's past, and she has a criminal record, and her struggles with her banking issues and financial issues, and of course she was diagnosed with cancer, and that is the real reason that, from what we've heard, everybody around the Ohio State program, the real reason Trayvon transferred, and not that there weren't issues with Trayvon and the coaching staff, but the real reason was that he also wanted to be closer to his mother, who has been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so basically LeBron is telling Bret McMurphy that the real reason that Trayvon transferred was because of this N-word being allegedly used by Zach Smith, and that Ohio State, pressured them to keep it hush-hush so the negative ramifications don't come out, and in return, Trayvon can go play for Florida. But it's like putting lipstick on a pig, because Bret puts all of these side things. He even quoted a couple of experts on cancer and what the treatment would be. And it's a shameful insinuation made, because basically LeBron Grimes is outright accusing Leah Grimes of faking cancer so that Trayvon could transfer to the University of Florida, that the NCAA would grant a waiver so that Trayvon could go to Florida and play right away, because the NCAA needed proof that Leah had cancer. And so not only is LeBron Grimes alleging that his ex-wife is faking cancer so that Trayvon could transfer, but basically Bret McMurphy is using that stance to justify his rationalization and his reporting that Zach Smith used a racially charged term, and Urban Meyer and Ohio State covered it up. This is so shameful. This whole report is based on around one guy who was speaking on the record, basically a second guy, his brother, but he is speaking on the record and, basically saying all these things, and he's got a criminal past. Among the many charges, by the way, this guy is facing a charge for battery. He's an alleged domestic abuser, by the way, which is another thing. Where are all the people complaining about giving a platform for a domestic abuser? Because I heard so many people when Zach Smith was going to go on the radio with Dan Dockich on 1070 The Fan in Indianapolis. I heard so many people, Brenda Tracy included, saying, "How dare you give a platform to an alleged domestic abuser?" Where are all the people and the outcry today as we talk about Bret McMurphy's story giving a platform to alleged domestic abuser LeBron Grimes? Where are those people now? And LeBron Grimes isn't just being charged with domestic abuse, but he's also in the past been convicted of cocaine possession and use, cocaine sales. And here's the funny thing. He's quoted in this story as saying, you can say all you want about my past, but I'm being truthful. I'm not a liar. Except he was convicted in the 1990s of fraud, forgery, and counterfeiting. So actually, yes, LeBron Grimes is, in fact, a liar. By every legal definition of the word, he is a liar. So this whole story centers around a felon and a guy that has been proven to have a shady track record and is accusing a mother of faking cancer to let her son transfer so that they can cover up for racially charged terms from an assistant coach and the program that wants to cover. So that's the conspiracy here, is that all of this around a star witness that is a former felon and some anonymous players at the University of Florida, by the way, who will not go on the record saying Trayvon echoed this story. So Bret McMurphy has zero, count them, zero witnesses that claim to have actually seen this take place, this altercation. There are zero people going on the record or speaking to him off the record saying that they actually witnessed this for themselves. Literally, these are all secondhand sources. They're all people claiming that Trayvon Grimes told them this occurred. And this is really shameful because not only does he not have anybody saying it, but throughout the story, so many times it says, what is the real truth? Well, it depends on who you ask. Am I losing my mind? Am I crazy here? If you have to rhetorically ask what the real truth is, you shouldn't have printed the actual story. Your job, Bret McMurphy, if you call yourself a journalist, is to find out what the truth is. If you have to print something alleging somebody makes a racist comment and it's being covered up, you better be damn sure you have the facts and you have the actual truth before you print it. Don't sit here and use a bunch of secondhand gossip that won't even, most of which won't even go on the record. Don't sit here and tell me that, you're doing your job, but, you have to ask, what is the truth? It's your job to know the truth before you print it, Bret McMurphy. This irritates me so much. You can say what you want about me. Look, my irritation and my anger at this, I don't care what you think of me, whether I'm an Ohio State fan, whether I'm being defensive of Ohio State or Zach Smith. People deserve better than this. I don't care who you are. This is not about Ohio State. Zach Smith, regardless of what you think about Zach Smith as a person, whether you think he's guilty or not of domestic violence, whatever kind of individual you think Zach Smith is, he deserves better. Ohio State deserves better. Urban Meyer deserves better. Every single person out there deserves better than to have their reputation ruined based on anonymous secondhand sources that did not witness this. Every single person associated with Ohio State on Tuesday came out defiantly against this. Every single receiver, a part of Zone 6, that were in that locker room, that were on the field that day, has said these are BS allegations, that an incident happened, but nothing like this occurred. I got news for you. Incidents happen, shouting matches happen between players and coaches. If the allegation is Zach Smith got into an altercation, a verbal shouting match with a receiver, well, guess what? That happens every freaking day on every single football team. Go watch a football practice someday. Go watch a basketball practice. These are competitors. Juices get flowing. People start yelling. It's natural for emotions to come out. Yes, Zach Smith probably said some things. Guess what? Every coach says things. But if you're going to allege racism, you better have more than this. Tate Martell alleges he is best friends with Trayvon Grimes, continues to be best friends with Trayvon Grimes, and said this never happened. Well, I promise you, and that's, by the way, a tweet made by Tate Martell saying that was liked by Trayvon Grimes. Grimes has been quiet through all this. Leah Grimes says, don't pay attention to my ex-husband. He's an abuser. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Trayvon has been quiet about this, but even the University of Florida had to call Bret McMurphy and tell him to back off because he would not leave Trayvon's mother alone. It's just shameful that they have to try to attack the credibility of Leah Grimes in order to make the credibility look better of LeBron Grimes because he's a convicted felon and he was not there. He did not see it. So even if Trayvon Grimes did tell him this happened, LeBron Grimes does not know because he was not there. This is at best secondhand information. That's if you believe Trayvon actually told his father this. And that's, who knows? That's anybody's guess. But that's the point. We're guessing. Bret McMurphy is guessing because he doesn't have anybody that was actually there to corroborate this information. Jalen Harris, who was roommates with Trayvon Grimes, came out on Twitter, said this did not happen. He was roommates. Bret doesn't have proof. The sex toy story looks like a Pulitzer Prize winning piece right about now. That's how bad this really is. It's lipstick on a pig. He goes through and researches all of this, to have all these facts, all these well-documented information to make it look like it's a well-sourced story. But when you pull back the veil, when you open the blanket, you see the man behind the curtain. All it is a convicted felon going off secondhand information, which may or may not be true. We don't know. My whole point here is, even if this were true, that Trayvon Grimes told his father this, and again, who knows, but because of who we're talking about, because of the lack of credibility for this one person going on the record, and because of the fact that for all this to be true, the whole crux of this story is that a woman faked stage 4 cancer, got an oncologist to document this, and told the NCAA that I have cancer. Why? All because they're helping to cover up a racial term, a racial epithet that was lobbied at her own son? This is crazy. You can't make this up. It just blows my mind. All of this for... Supposedly Ohio State was covering all this up. How? In this day and age, with social media and the whole social injustice movement, and I don't mean to call it that to try to disparage a anti-racial movement racist movement, because honestly, if somebody is a racist, they should be called out for it. So I'm not trying to disparage that, but I'm saying in this day and age, with our culture being so sensitive as it is, if there were actually something like a legitimate racial epithet, hurled in practice by a coach, you don't think there's somebody in that locker room that wouldn't have come out with that? You can't keep that quiet. It's insane to think about. Like I said, there was all this pressure, all this, blowback when Zach was going to go on with Dan Dockich, 1070 The Fan in Indianapolis. Because you can't give an alleged domestic abuser a platform. That's exactly what Bret McMurphy did with this story. He gave an alleged domestic abuser a platform. Where's the outrage? Can somebody tell me? Where is the outrage to Bret McMurphy for doing that? And all those people that care about journalism, all these people, they care about what Zach Smith was saying on Twitter about Tom Herman. They care when Tom Herman's personality, his character gets attacked by Zach. Where are those people defending journalism this day and age? You have an opinion when Zach says something on Twitter, but then all these journalists refuse to call this trash out for what it is. This breaks so many ethical violations. There was a journalism professor at Ohio State that spoke out on Twitter, basically saying it would be too long to go over every single ethical violation within the story, but it's so bad they're going to go over it in journalism class. Today as we speak, that professor is in her class. She's telling her students, she's going through picking apart piece by piece in this story what Bret McMurphy did wrong. he's becoming a journalism lesson what not to do as a reporter. But where are all those journalists out there? Where are they? Why are they not being critical about this? I weep for journalism. I don't care what you think my motivation is. I despise that there are people out there that just go quiet when they don't agree with a story because it's a fellow journalist that they have been patting on the back for the last 3 months. And now when the credibility of this reporter is finally called into question with junk journalism such as this, they go quiet. They're nowhere to be found. And either you're being intellectually dishonest or you are letting your own personal bias, and yes, I'm going to throw that back in their faces because you know what? I don't care what this means to Ohio State. I do care what this means to people. I don't think anybody should be subjected to this kind of prejudicial crap in the media without some kind of factual basis, and he has none. So I ask these people, what kind of bias do you have against Ohio State wanting to see a successful coach or a successful program taken down because you made up your mind on July 24th that somebody was guilty of domestic violence? That now, when every single report gets worse and worse by this guy who has no ethics, that you refuse to call it out. I'm just astounded, and I weep for the state of journalism. And there are some real people that need to look themselves in the mirror and ask themselves, what's more important, journalism or just making a story and clickbait? Because right now, I don't see anybody standing up for actual ethics in reporting. This is terrible. This is garbage. It's tabloid journalism at best. I'm glad that Ohio State came out. Michael Drake, President Michael Drake, and Athletic Director Gene Smith, they came out and issued some very sternly worded statements. And whether that was because Urban, basically said, you need to back me or else, I don't know. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Regardless of the reason, at least they came out and backed him. I applaud them for that. That's what should have been done in the first place. When everybody realized this was no longer about domestic abuse, that's what Ohio State should have done. They should have been just come out and issued sternly worded statements, that puts Bret McMurphy to shame because this was garbage. They did their homework. They investigated it. They found there's nothing to it. Not a single person that was there said a racial term was used, and they called it out. They said, it's baseless. There's nothing to it. It's what they should have done in the first place. This stopped being about domestic violence around first or second week of August. It stopped being about domestic violence. It just became a sideshow, and that's all it's been ever since. Look, this is terrible, and I hope that Ohio State. Urban Meyer said on the Big Ten teleconference on Tuesday, he is considering legal action. That Ohio State is considering legal action. Look, the standards on liable are pretty high. The information basically has to be false, and you either have to know it's false and publish it anyway, or you have to have reckless disregard for the truth, meaning you may not know it was false, but you easily could have gone a little further to document and find out whether it's true. And if you're running a story on the basis of secondhand information, one guy going on the record with secondhand information and a couple anonymous sources with secondhand information, look, I'm no lawyer. I'm just giving my lay opinion here. I think that's reckless. If you're sitting here, you're writing an article where you're asserting that there was a cover-up. You're asserting that a racial comment was made and there was a cover-up. And you have to ask, what's the real truth, rhetorically, because you don't know. If you don't know, don't write it. I mean, it's a pretty simple answer, right? If you don't know, don't write it. Your job as a journalist is to uncover facts. If you can't actually prove or have reasonable evidence that something happened, just don't write it. I mean, come on. This isn't rocket science here. I hope Ohio State sues the pants off of Bret McMurphy. And again, it's not because it's Ohio State. It's not because I'm backing Zach Smith or backing Urban Meyer, or backing Ohio State. I'm just backing journalism. This kind of writer gives journalism a bad name, and unfortunately there are a lot of other writers giving themselves bad names because they're not calling this out. But I am going to call it out. I'm not afraid. This kind of crap is terrible. This guy has been given way too much latitude, so I hope Ohio State goes after him. They may not be able to prove liable. That's going to be a tough case. It's a tough standard. There is standing, by the way. There are some people saying, well, there's no grounds for this. Yeah, there actually is. This is a potential defamation suit. It's not a sure thing. They could go and it'll be very difficult to prove in court. You remember Gawker got taken down in a defamation case because they published a sex video involving Hulk Hogan. And yeah, that was backed by a billionaire who was outed by Gawker, and he was upset about it. And they had a lot of financial backing, and they certainly had money behind it. But at the end of the day, a jury went in and found 7-5 that, I believe it was 7-5. It was a 12-person jury. I think it was 7-5 was the ratio. But they found that Gawker, the defamation case was legitimate because it was intrusion of privacy and it was excessive, etc., etc. They had the truth. They had an actual video. It was a legit video. It was Hulk Hogan. They had the truth on their side, and they still lost. So this is a different case, but I'm saying while libel is hard to prove, you just never know. You get into a jury, you can find 7 or 8 sympathetic jurors. Remember, it's not like a criminal conviction. You don't need all 12. You just need the majority, the preponderance of evidence. So even though the standard is higher, you can get some sympathetic jurors to say, you know what, this is ridiculous. This was reckless. Basically he's accusing this guy of being racist or making racist comments. He's accusing Ohio State of covering it up. He's accusing the mother of faking cancer in order to get the transfer so that they could cover it up. I mean, those are a lot of giant leaps there. And so when you really break this down and think of what he's alleging for this to be true, it is reckless, and I hope Ohio State goes after him if for no other reason than this kind of irresponsible journalism needs to be taken to task. Anyhow, I've said my piece. I appreciate you sticking with me for these 25, 26, 27 minutes here. I will be back on Friday. Remember, we'll get back to actual football on Friday. We'll preview Ohio State, Maryland. Taysom Hill, the starting quarterback for Maryland, will be out the rest of the season, so that's kind of a tough blow for the Terrapins. We'll see. That might be a big help for an Ohio State defense that suddenly looked great last week. We'll see if they can continue that momentum. We will preview Ohio State, Maryland, and remember Ohio State basketball back in action on Thursday at Creighton, which will be a big test for them. We will talk about Ohio State, Creighton on the show on Friday as well. So very much looking forward to it. Again, thank you for joining me. I hate that it's under these circumstances. Baltimore is back. I don't mind saying his name. I will call him out. I am not afraid. But anyhow, follow me on Twitter at KYLam8. You can catch the show normally on Monday and Friday, outside of the special edition here on Wednesday. Catch us on Monday and Friday. We are on BuckeyeGrove.com. You can also catch us on SoundCloud, where we publish, in iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can follow us, rate, review, all that good stuff. We'll be back again on Friday. Hope to talk to you again. We'll talk some football and basketball. Enjoy, everybody.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.